Universal patinas on metal coatings. To start off, we've got this resin cast and we're going to apply Primate Black. Now, as we've stated in many other videos, the color of Primate doesn't really make a difference. It's just a starting color and the metal coating over the top will cover it completely. The Primate can be brushed on, sponged on, rolled on, sprayed on. Any way you get it onto the piece, it will go on. It's just a matter of characteristics that's being applied. How I'm using this sponge, I'm trying to limit how many actual sponge marks I'm getting. I'm kind of just smearing it on. But any application technique will do. You just got to minimize the effects of the application. Now, we're going to use universals for this video, but I think it's important to distinguish that it also works for dioxides just fine. So for this application, its universals are being applied, but the dioxides will work as well. Just like with on actual metal, how universals are applied with heat, the dioxides are applied very similarly. So it is pretty transferable. The colors are a little bit different, so take a look at our color chart so you can determine which line will be best for you. But for the metal coating application, it's basically the same. After we've applied 2 coats of the primate, we'll put on the silver B metal coating. Now, we can use this with the bronze or the copper, the iron, all the metal coatings the universals will work on. The reason why we're going to highlight the silver in this video is the silver and the pewter metal coatings will not react with a traditional patina. So, it makes it a prime candidate for using a universal or a dioxide in order to get some color on it. And we're just going to brush it on or stipple it in some areas. But again, just like in other videos, you can brush it, spray it, sponge it, roll it. Any way the metal coating goes over the primate, it will adhere just fine. I do recommend trying to go thinner over thicker just to keep the aesthetic. So like in this hand, we're going to keep the crinkles or the wrinkles in the hands. And so you keep the details the thinner you go. I don't normally recommend thinning down the metal coatings. But if you find that you need to, then you can thin it with about 10% distilled water. One of the questions we get most when regarding the universals or dioxides on the metal coatings is, do you do it hot or cold? Well, the metal coatings don't actually like heat because it's an acrylic base, so you will do it cold. Following that question, we get, do you do it when it's wet or dry? And that's what we're going to address here. So we're putting on a second coat of the silver B metal coating. And in this part, we're going to apply it while the silver B is still wet. I think it's important to note here that something like the smart stains, they can be similar-esque to the universals or dioxides, but that's one I recommend going on to dry metal coating. The universal and dioxides, you can do either, but it does change the effect. So I would recommend doing a test sample to see which effect you like most or what will work best for this piece. But to start, we will do it on wet silver B metal coating. And we're going to use the Universal Black. And when we go to put it on, I'm going to spray it over everything. Depending on what you want it to look like, you can always burnish it back a little bit, because like a wet paper towel after the metal coating has dried the next day, you can pull a little bit of the color back, or you can do highlighting of more metal coating the next day, something along those lines. So there are little tips and tricks, but I'm trying to compare just the two factors, wet versus dry applications. So we're just going to kind of put it on there and let it be and soak it entirely. So we're just going to spray it on and get it pretty saturated. It's not 100%, and you can see it is kind of running a little bit because the universals are very viscous. So it doesn't all stay right up on top, and that's just one of the application techniques you've kind of got to figure out as you go. But to give an apple-to-apple comparison, we're trying to do this the same. There's no chemical reaction going on here, so you don't need to wait a couple days like you do in some of the other cases. I would recommend at least 24 hours, but typically I do wait 48, especially in the winter time, just to make sure that it can dry completely. So 48 hours, we're going to put some ClearGuard matte on here, and this is the EF matte, but it's not going to make much of a difference between the two. You'll hear in other videos where we will say that the EF matte helps retain some of the colors. With the Universal Black, I don't notice a difference. So here's our wet applied with the Universal Black, and I really liked how this turned out. It kind of created its own kind of aging feel. It's not really black, which is nice, and there are tips you can do to get it even more opaque, but for me, I really like the subtlety of how this one turned out. Here we're going to go on with the Universal Black on the dry metal coating. So this already has 2 coats of primate, 2 coats of Silver B, we let it dry completely, and then we're going to go over with the Universal Black. So with all the steps being the same except for letting the Silver B dry before putting on the Universal, everything else is exactly the same. I believe we waited about 24 hours after the Silver B second application was applied before we put on the Universal, but you could wait even longer. So if you like how this one turns out, it doesn't matter if you wait 24 hours or a week, this will still be about the same. It's just a matter of dialing that in. So after the ClearGuard matte, here's what we have for this one, and you can see the color came in a little bit darker, but for me it's a much more speckly look. It's just a matter of preference. I prefer to put it on wet, and so that's the way I normally recommend it to customers. But try it out, see what you like. Either way, it works fine. Primate, Silver B Metal Coating, Universal Black, and ClearGuard are all available at www.sculptnouveau.com or by calling us at 760-432-8242.